الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين جاهدوا فينا لنهدينهم سبلنا سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. One of the things that you may have noticed then that our deen Islam emphasizes that we control each and every aspect of our existence. And when I say existence, it means our physical existence as well as our metaphysical existence. And especially a person who considers themselves a seeker of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning they have made this tahiyyah, this intention, this irada, that they want to become a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they want to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gain his ma'arifah, gain his qurb, then it becomes especially important that they take heed of these injunctions in this deen. So, for example, the Quran, in the Nas itself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ يَغُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ, that tell the mu'mineen, and in another ayah, it says, tell the mu'minat that they should lower their gaze. So what we are being told right here is what? That we should control our gaze, our sight, what we look at. And the secret behind this is, and it is well understood that when something enters through our eyesight into our wujud, it has an effect on our existence, it has an effect on who we are. It changes who we are. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created insan with certain hiss, certain ihsasat. And one of them is ihsas jamal, aesthetic sense. So when we look at something that is displeasing to the eyes, that has an effect on our batin or our existence. Similarly, if we look at something that is pleasing to our eyes, that has an effect on our self, on our existence as well. That is why it's important to control it. Now take this and look at any injunction of the Sharia, controlling our tongue, right? Because the tongue, what is uttered through the tongue, it has an effect. So if a person is screaming, not only will it affect the other person, it will affect themselves. When a person lies, there's a psychological effect that happens on a person. When a person is doing backbiting, if you are tuned into your inner self, into your wujud, then you can see that effect. Right? Same thing very clearly, what you listen to. Again, when we listen to something good, the other day we were listening to some Quran by Qari Basit Sahib rahmatullah ta'ala alayh. It just has such an ajib effect on the wujudi effect. Right? Similarly, if a person listens to something haram, that will also have an effect. And this is actually proven by neuroscience as well. I remember a study where they took certain people who were exposed to a lot of bass, the bass, the drums in music, and they saw that it had an effect, like a clear effect on the MRI in the neurochemistry of a person. So it changes a person. It changes who you are. Now, this is also true when it comes to our heart. People of tasawwuf, people who emphasize dhikr and tazkiyah and tasfiyah, they will tell you that this is something that you have to be very, very careful about, that, take care of your heart. Your heart is meant for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do not allow the taint of this dunya or even people of this dunya in the heart, right? That is one thing that we try to practice even in our muraqabah, the routine of muraqabah. We try to negate everything and everyone in this dunya, right? So the heart becomes clean. And same thing when it comes to our nafs, which is a source of chahat, things that we desire, that it is easy to desire things that are undesirable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Because the nafs usually looks for pleasure, and the thing is that we find pleasure in things that we see are very in front of us, that we have experienced to our hawas. right? The nafs has experienced those things through the hawas, through the senses, and they are very present in front of us. So the nafs gets attached to them, right? Things of pleasure, anything of pleasure, the nafs will grasp like a magnet will try to attach itself to it. So we have to control, the Surah Shams, subhanallah, Allah Ta'ala swears by this, that yes, your nafs, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَالتَّقْوَاهَا, that we have inspired within the nafs this khair and shar, right? But it is up to you now. This is part of your test that you have to protect yourself, control yourself, and attain this tazkiyah, this purification of self. So this is clear so far. What I wanted to focus a little bit on today was our mind as well, right? Because what we read, what we are exposed to in our communities, in our societies, right? Meaning when it goes into our mind and when we think about it, that also has a very wujudi effect, more so than we can know and understand, right? So, for example, people will read some share, some poetry, it's like, oh, subhanallah, it will just open up ways of thinking that you never thought that were possible, right? And just like it is important to control and make sure that we keep and put some boundaries around this in terms of our other hawas, senses, physical or metaphysical, it is important that we are careful about what we consume that takes its place into our minds. Because it's very difficult sometimes to get rid of that evil, that poison. Hmm? वो कहते हैं ना कि याद माजी है अजाब या रब छीन ले मुझसे हाफिज़ा मेरा. Because now याद माजी means, the memory of your past. Whatever you have thought about, whatever you have consumed, it will become part of your thinking process. It will, and eventually become part of your worldview. And so, why is that important today? More so maybe than before? Because before, Muslims and us and young minds, they were not exposed to isms, to different ideologies, to different worldviews like they are today. Then the question becomes, oh, are we not comfortable with our own worldview and our own, ideology and our own deen? Of course we are, but the problem is that we are not well versed in it. Okay? We have like an emotional attachment to the deen, but we have not really thought through all of the, what they call the, bianiyas, with all the um, postulations of them. We haven't thought through them, so the mind a lot of times is not clear how to create that amarat, that building of our own consciousness. So we accept it. It's not like, we are bad Muslims. We accept, oh, this is part of the deen, this is part of the deen, this, and we keep on accepting it without actually having an active consciousness that actually thinks about and thinks through these things, right? And so this is why we gain ilm, and this is why it's important to gain ilm. And talabul ilm is faridatun ala kulli muslim wal muslimat, that the talab or the gaining of ilm is knowledge is essential for every Muslim and Muslimah, for every male and female Muslim. That is why we do it, right? It's not so we can be called ulama. It's not because, it helps us not, no, because it really puts our intellect, our mind, our intellect in the right order so we are able to look at the dunya in the proper way. So now, even if you get exposed to all of these isms around us, all of these foreign ideologies, ways of thinking, it doesn't affect you because you're very comfortable in your own skin. Okay? But till you get to the point, we will put ourselves in danger, right? So, for example, the youth today, let's say now you're living in Northeast, right? You're living in Northeast, people go to schools, people go to colleges. Do you think that there's not a specific worldview that is being indoctrinated? Of course there is. Of course there is. Whether we recognize it or not. This is a very, it's a secular society, right? So secularism is literally like put down our throats wherever we look. It's a very materialistic society, right? And so, it goes, we can trace all of this back. This is not like something, oh my God, what did I grow up? No, we can trace all of this back to this, what we call modernism and postmodernism. These are eras, these are philosophies and ways of thinking that were very prevalent through centuries and that developed a certain mindset and the systems that grew out of it. So the education system, the economic system, the understanding of societies, the social sciences, the humanities, the politics, right? International affairs, all of that grew out of a very specific manifestation of modernism. And the reason I'm not trying to get into those philosophies. What I'm trying to say is that people who are very or should be concerned about their iman, they should understand what they're being exposed to. So when we go to school, the school is not there to tell you metaphysical realities or teach you metaphysical realities because it is part of their teaching goals that nothing metaphysical can be taught. Your science, it disallows you to have any metaphysical explanations for any physical phenomena. You cannot even bring it up. You'll be ridiculed, right? So this is a way of thinking that we people get indoctrinated. And people who continue thinking that this is where the scientism comes in, right? This is where only empiricism and science can answer questions for me and nothing else can answer questions for me. Everything is built here to take us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was what secularism was. Reducing your deen to just something very personal. Like personally, let's say I like, baklava. That's up to me. Nobody's going to stop me. There's no rules, regulations, laws. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. This is what they call, this is your individual kind of act. As an individual, whatever you want to do. You want to sit in your room and sit on your jainamaz, musalla, you want to pray, go ahead. Nobody will, a secular state is not going to stop you. You want to read your Quran, be my guest. As long as you are a good consumer, as long as you're a good taxpayer, right? As long as, what they call harm principle, right? Again, this is coming from all of that enlightenment thought and then modernity. Harm principle is as long as I am not harming anybody else, I can do whatever I want. Social norms, bhaad mein jaye, tradition, bhaad mein jaye, nobody really cares. I can do whatever I want. Okay? Harm principle, no. So we also start to think like this. Oh, okay, well, maybe my deen is a very individual kind of thing. It's not a collective. And we also say, okay, I'm only going to start thinking about Allah in my very few, when I am in the masjid, okay, I have to act in a specific way. Or when I'm in a madrasa or a khanaqah, I have to act specific. Other than that, it's the same principles that we look for. Hmm? It's the same thing. Hmm? And so we have, as a community, as an ummah, and I just want to, because there are so many isms out there, many, 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 and they all are just kind of these fangs, these tentacles coming out of modernity. And it's not just this, we're not just talking about this specific society. This is global in nature. If anybody who has taken history or has an understanding of history, this whole concept of countries that we call different by different names, this nation state, everybody should understand this came after World War One and World War Two, right? So don't we should not delude ourselves. We are living in these systems these structures that exist already, and we need to be equipped intellectually and spiritually to make sure we understand them, to protect ourselves from them, and to protect our progeny, our kids from them as well. Why? Because when you get infected by this, I mean, today, now you find I'm a Marxist Muslim, right? I'm a secular Muslim. No, it's a thing now. It's a thing now. that I'm a Marxist Muslim, I'm a Leninist Muslim, I'm a secular Muslim, I'm right. It's very ajib, and we have to kind of understand that minds get infected because these a lot of these people, they got exposed to these ideologies without having a good footing in their own way of life. And when you ask them, and I've spoken to people, it's like, what happened? Oh, no, no, I used to go to Sunday school. I used to pray 5 times a day. I read Quran, from the maktab, and I did this. Meaning they have done a few acts of ibadah, but they haven't done anything to nourish and mold their minds and intellect. And just like I said, we have to put certain boundaries in all of our senses, and they failed to do that, and they were consuming all of these isms. Last 20. I mean, you guys are young here, right? Well, most of you, right? And you're born in the age of YouTube and whatnot, and so people are just online listening to X, Y, and Z. These Christian apologists and these like atheists who were just like, new atheism was a thing, right? They are out there just regurgitating garbage after garbage. And Muslims who are not equipped how to deal with this, what happens? They listen to this, shak, shubh, shak, shubh. All of these things start to get planted in the mind. They get planted in the mind, and then it infects your own worldview, and then it becomes so difficult. Then all the struggle inside, and then no, 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 I have to pray more. I have to pray this away, right? And people know what's happening. I'm praying, but still, because the way, again, our wujud has now become tainted. What is wujud? Our consciousness, right? Which you can say is composed of your emotions, your heart, your desires, as well as your all of that gets tainted. And we think, no, no, it has to be, no, I have to pray like more, or I have to read Quran. Of course there's barakah in it. I'm not diminishing that at all. Of course there's barakah in it. But at the end of the day, you have to treat the cancer. And the cancer is, those things that have become part of your mindset. And the way that you get rid of it is you have to deconstruct it. Just like you constructed the building, you have to demolish it, but in a proper way. And that will require, some scholarly intervention. When people, they're addicted to drugs, there's that intervention, rehab. And so you need intervention and rehab to get rid of certain things, right? And so when it comes to this infection of the mind, this is exactly what infection of the mind, just like there's infection of the heart, like what we call the diseases of the heart, right? When everybody knows about this, the shahwa, the ghussa, the tama, the hirs, the hasad, the bukhal, and ujab, and takabbur, and shahan, and malice, and all of these things, right? These are, of course, these are diseases or infections of the heart. Now, when we come to the infections of the mind, these shukuk, these shubhat, right? These foreign isms and ideologies, they just come, and like a parasite, they just make their way. They're just sitting there. They're just sitting there. And because the ilm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the deen, the sciences that come out of it. And I'm not just talking about the fiqh aspect of things, because that is a dhulm that we have done, that we have just reduced even ilm, that you just have to understand, you know, how do you do wudu, and how do you do, the tahara and salah, and like, of course, they're part of the ibadat aspect of things. But your mu'amalat, your mu'ashirat, because you live in a society. Now, if I was living in some village where I was not exposed to internet, there was no smartphone, I was getting up early in the morning, and all I have to go is like go and tend to my farms and raise my cattle. That's a beautiful way of living. You wish we were living like that, right? In such a pure way, and mashallah, you have your sheep running around, and right? Then, of course, just this aspect of, then you go to your Mufti Sahib and Maulvi Sahib, and how do I purify myself? How do I do my salahs? Tell me these things because that's all that matters at that time. Your family, your local community, which is your village, everybody is aligned. There's no infection of the mind there. Nobody's going to come there and tell you like power structures that exist within the society, and like how these class wars exist, and how private property versus public property, and nobody's, because there's no discussion there. And there's no need to have that. So there's nothing else you need. You just focus on that. You focus on virasat because people die. You focus on how you do janaza. You focus on how you do nikah, how do you talaq, and that's it. But unfortunately, we're not living in that world again, right? And this is why there's this resurgence even in our madaris of understanding and teaching, sciences that may have been like de-emphasized a little bit before, right? What we call like logical theology, kalam, right? Now this kalam itself, it grew out of a need. The need was that before, certain questions were just not asked. So there was no need to think about those things. So very much qalu sami'na wa ta'ala. For very like the Salaf, they did not have to worry about those things. But as this deen grew, and as books got translated, and all the Greek kind of philosophy kind of got introduced, then you had to, ulama, they had to stand up, and they had to protect and preserve their tradition. And so answers were, again, a logical way of thinking about things, they were developed. So you have the Asha'ira, the Maturidis, there was a need there. There was a need. Before that, it was just athari. It was just, you just very literalist kind of understanding it. It's fine. Like a textualist understanding, it's fine because there's no need. It's like that person you're living in a very pure society. Those questions are not being raised. So why raise them? Right? Why raise them? Nobody's just out there just thinking, like, who am I? It's just, Alhamdulillah, I'm a Muslim. The worldview is there. Like, how do I excel at being a Muslim? That's it. So when you are exposed to you have to take certain steps. 40 years, 34, well, let's say like when was the TV, not for, whenever TV was made, even before that, in order to be exposed, you had to go to scholars, you had to, go to libraries, you'd have to take out books, you had to be very like what they call like a bookworm. You had to read those books, and then you would you would get this infection. Otherwise, there was no other way. Maybe a little bit of akhbar, but not everybody was reading akhbar. So as media, as communication or telecommunication, that just became much, much, more ubiquitous, like more, accepted and used. Now everybody's exposed. Like everybody's watching TV. I remember in my, younger times, right? Like a TV was, not every household had TV. And the first time TV, I was like, oh, they got TV, and it was like black and white, and there was like an antenna on the top that you were fixing all the time, right? And there was news once a day, and it was very basic. And then the proliferation of just like channels, and then your people are just like 24-hour cycles, right? And then with internet, and this is an internet generation. It's like all of this is at the tip of their hands. They're being taught this at schools. Every single one of them is being taught this at schools. Colleges are like a hub of indoctrination of these things. You cannot imagine. I mean, when we go to college, you think we can stand up and talk about our deen? No, no, there's no way. Go to a biology class and go to like and talk about, no, this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created her. No, no, no. They will sit there, they will talk about, Darwinism and this and this and this. They'll talk about all of that, and we'll be khamosh, tamashai. Just listening. So this is how people these are good people, they're good Muslims. This exposure, this lack of, their own understanding of on their traditions and how we're supposed to be answering these things, how we're supposed to be thinking about the dunya, right? It just, a lot of our youth get wasted. Good children, good children, they get wasted. So this is why it's important, again, to bring people back to circles. When I say circles of learning, this is, you learn in a very methodical, systematic way of how to deal with these things that we're already exposed to. And circles of spirituality, so we learn how to nourish and mold our batin. So the strong attachment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. So nothing will derail us. Nothing will take us away from Allah. Do you get it? There's a need just for, this is a survival thing. Okay, this is not even anymore like a, you become a great wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thing. This is a survival of our iman thing, that we have to have these. Okay? And so this is why it's important that, not only do we attach ourselves to these, as I said, circles of learning and spirituality, but also take our friends, your brothers, and that you're familiar with, and on the sister side, they take their sisters to these things, inshallah. With that understand, that is why we're there. That is why we're there. This is how the deen and tradition will survive. Otherwise, there are countless examples of how, people lost their Christianity, right? What is Christianity now? It's like another word for like secular humanism. That's it. Nothing more. There's no system there. Right? And they're cultural Jews, they're the cultural Hindus, they're cultural, meaning they've all lost all of that. And now you see that they're just cultural Muslims. Cultural Muslims. When you talk to them, there's absolutely no Islamic worldview. Nothing. Nothing. At the most, they will go and they will partake in like Eid Salah. Why? Because it's a community thing. It's a community thing. So they enjoy. It's the experience, anthropological kind of experience. Experience of culture. Just like when we go, oh, mashallah, what's happening in this? Oh, it looks nice. Let me see when, so this is what happens. To them, it's like a cultural experience. Allah is not there. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is not there. The Quran is not there. The Deen is not there. Akhirah is not there. None of it is there. It's just, ठीक है? So inshallah ta'ala, this is something that we'll talk a little bit more about over and over again, inshallah ta'ala, because we have to become those people who protect ourselves, but help others protect them. When you listen, when you talk to them, you can just hear. You can hear just this poison just coming out. And you can tell where they got it. For example, Pakistan is a beautiful example. And I'm amazed how isms are wholesale imported into Pakistan. I mean, I'm from Pakistan, so a few years back there was this very interesting, Mera Jism Mera Marzi kind of like a whole movement that started. Wholesale, just take it. There was a Me Too movement here. Wholesale, just taken there. There was a transgender movement here. Wholesale, it was just taken there. It's very easy. Wholesale, like not even any changes. Things that don't even relate to them in any way whatsoever, because the society is different, the history is different. Doesn't matter. Wholesale is just taken and it's just adopted. It's very sad to see. And I'm just giving that one example, but other countries, these nation states are exactly like that. So it's important that, we as an ummah, think about how to preserve our iman. And it's not just like talk. Oh, how do you preserve iman? No, we have to really take an approach that has the intellectual element in it, that has the spiritual element in it, right? And this is why you might have seen, that I very emphasize, like get rid of this thoughts of like sectarian thoughts and what. There's a reason behind it. There's a reason behind it. Not because, the difference aren't important. Yeah, but it's that if we are consumed by those sectarian, these wider societal issues that are really bombarding our youth and us, it'll become like a blind sight to us, right? That we will just not so, and it will come and it will consume us. It will consume us. So inshallah ta'ala, um, you know, inshallah ta'ala, we should think about ways of how we can protect ourselves and protect our imans, inshallah ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can, inshallah ta'ala, uh, give us a good khatima bil khair death, inshallah ta'ala, and a death of iman. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us on guidance. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us on haqq. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from the effects of shaitan, our nafs, other people's nafs, other isms, other ideologies. Ameen ya Rabbul Alameen. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.